In this movie, I'll show you how to create and employ a sublayer. And a sublayer is just what it sounds like. It's a layer inside of a layer. And sublayers are great when you want to take a group of objects and either lock them down or hide them while keeping them inside a given layer. For example, let's say I want to protect everything that's currently blue inside my illustration. Then I would go ahead and partially marquee these objects using my black arrow tool, taking care not to move too far up because then I'll select the word good. So I'll select pretty low like so. And that selects everything except the word good. Now if I twirl open the design layer, you can see these orange squares next to each one of the selected objects. Now there's a couple of ways to create a new sublayer. One is to make sure that the design layer is active as it is, and then you drop down to this create new sublayer icon and either click on it if you want to create an unnamed sublayer, or if you want to name the thing as you make it, then alt click or option click on that icon. And I'll go ahead and call my layer frame. And I want to assign a color that's complementary to the gold that's assigned to the design layer. So I'll go with something like cyan, let's say, and click OK. But there's a problem with this approach. Notice that the frame sublayer appears at the top of the design layer, and it has its own unique color, which is fine. However, that color can bleed into the objects below it. And that happens if you twirl close that design layer and then twirl it back open. Now you can see all the objects below the frame sublayer are colored cyan. That's something of a bug, but here's the workaround. I'll press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z on the Mac to undo the creation of that sublayer, and that doesn't take care of my problem until I twirl the design layer close and then twirl it back open. The solution is to create your sublayer at the bottom of the stack. Now that's not always possible, but it is in my case. So I'll go ahead and click on the design layer there inside the Layers panel, and then I'll press the Control and Alt keys or the Command and Option keys on the Mac and click on Create New Sublayer. And that goes ahead and puts the new sublayer at the bottom of the design layer. And I'll call this layer frame again, and I'll assign a color of cyan, and then click OK. And now by virtue of the fact that this sublayer is at the bottom, it's not going to affect the color of any of the other objects. Now we need to move the selected objects into that sublayer. You can go ahead and drag any one of these orange squares right here, but that will end up moving just that one object. If you want to move all the selected objects, you need to drag the orange square to the right of the design layer, all the way down the stack like so, and then drop it into the frame sublayer. So that's one way to work. I'll go ahead and press Ctrl-Z or Command-Z on the Mac so I can show you the other way, which is to click on this topmost selected object and then shift-click on the bottommost object in order to select them here inside the Layers panel, and then go ahead and drag them directly into that frame sublayer. All right, now we're left with just a couple of objects here that are not inside the frame sublayer. That is this text, the word good. And also, I've got this path that's turned off. I'll go ahead and turn it on for a moment here. It's this little spirograph effect. And just so I can keep track of what this path is, I'll go ahead and double click on it and rename it Spiro. And a great thing about Illustrator is that you can name anything on an object by object basis here inside the Layers panel. All right, I'll go ahead and turn that spirograph back off. And I'll click on good in order to select it. Now currently, this is live editable text. However, in order to create these final 3D letters, I need to convert the text to outlines. So I'm going to switch back to my document here. And you do that, by the way, by going up to the Type menu and choosing the Create Outlines command. However, that ruins your ability to edit the type later on down the line. So I typically, before I choose this command, I go ahead and make a copy of my text. And so what I'm going to do is keep this text safe by putting it inside yet another sublayer. So I'll click on Design in order to make it active, and then I'll press the Control and Alt keys or the Command and Option keys on the Mac and click on the Create New Sublayer icon. And I'll call this sublayer Safe because that's its purpose. And I'll change its color to light blue there at the top of the stack because that seems like a safe color. Now I'll click OK in order to make this layer. And I actually want this layer to be on top of frame, so I'll move it up just by dragging it. And then I'll drag good down into the safe sublayer. And we can see good is now in the layer because of the thumbnail. I'm going to go ahead and twirl it open so that I can see the word good there. I'm going to click on it to make it active, and I'm going to create a copy of this object by going up to the Layers panel flyout menu and choosing Duplicate Good. And that will copy the text and deselect the original text, as you can see. All right, with the copied text still selected here, I'll go up to the Type menu and choose Create Outlines, or you can press Ctrl-Shift-O or Command-Shift-O on the Mac. And as you can see, that goes ahead and converts the letters to path outlines. All right, now I'm going to do something that might seem a little strange at first. I'm going to hide the safe layer by clicking on its eye to turn it off. and that hides both the editable version of the text as well as the text that's been converted to paths here inside the sublayer. Now I want to make a copy of the text that's been converted to path outlines. So I'll click on this top item here, which is called Group, and I'll press the Alt key or the Option key on the Mac, and I'll drag it outside of the sublayer. And notice as soon as I do, that will not only create a copy of that group, but it will also make the copy visible here inside the illustration. And that's because it's now part of the larger visible layer as opposed to the hidden sublayer. And now I'll go ahead and twirl that sublayer closed. And finally, I'll go ahead and lock down that frame layer by clicking inside this column just to the right of the eyeball. And there you have a couple of uses for sublayers, which allow you to both hide and lock groups of objects here inside Illustrator.